what's our neighbors doing? They don't necessarily need to be in the food, but if they were in toxic chemical, I would suggest that that may not be the best place to have this facility.
Hey, podcast listener. This is the THC Foodie, where you can get the scoop on the business of THC-infused foods. If you'd like to learn more about what we do, check out the THCfoodie.com and icecreamprivatelabel.com. Today, Daryl's talking about some of the tasks involved in building an ice cream or non-dairy manufacturing facility. He starts out with a bulleted list of what you are going to have to keep in mind when building your manufacturing facility. So you're going to want to get out a pencil and paper for this one. You can also check out icecreamprivatelabel.com/building a manufacturing facility to get the bulleted list. Today, we are going over the first bullet point in the list, choosing a space and how big should your space be. Daryl goes over some of the most important decisions that you have to make before choosing your space and why deciding what kind of product you will be manufacturing, as well as the size of your product, is key so that you don't sign a lease with a space that is not going to be suitable to your needs.
Okay. So first of all, you would want to know what you are manufacturing and what size you want to package in and who your target customer is. Second would be your space requirements, square footage requirements for your building your manufacturing plant. Knowing who the inspection arm of the facility will be is important, so you can talk to them early on. They're either going to be Department of Agriculture or through the local health department. Lease or purchase your space or building, the pluses and minuses of that. Manufacturing equipment. Is it best to have manual, semi-automatic, or fully automated equipment for your facility? What equipment is required? What's the utility requirement? Do you need a contractor? Can you do it yourself? Can you manage the project yourself and have different contractors come in? When is the right time to sign the agreement? And when is it the right time to sign each contractor agreement? So we have the space agreement, we have the contractor agreement, and what about the interaction with the inspector? When should that happen? That would be the bullet list on building and manufacturing. So in order to look at a space that's going to work for you today and for the next variety of years, it's important for you to know what size package. If it's 2.5 gallon tubs, if it's pints, 8 ounce, 4 ounce, squeeze tubes, popsicles. It is important each, depending on what you want to make and the size you want to make it in, is going to dictate the kind of equipment you need, and that equipment footprint is going to dictate the kind of space you need. There's no set number. I'm not going to tell someone that 1,500 square feet is your typical manufacturing facility. Once you know what you're making, then say, what equipment do I need for the first year in business, and what can I grow into over the next 3 to 5 years? We will look at the full footprint of a space and look at the growth capabilities, because you don't want to get into a starting space, spend for the infrastructure, and then outgrow it in a year, because there's certain things that you can't take with you. We want to look at the space. We want to look at what's our neighbors doing. They don't necessarily need to be in the food, but if they were in toxic chemical, I would suggest that that may not be the best place to have this facility. It doesn't have to be on a busy thoroughfare, because we are not worried about passerby stopping in. This is a facility that may not even have a sign on. So the square footage is going to be looked at. It could be anywhere from 1,000 to 5,000 square feet. The other piece that's kind of important when you're looking at the space requirements is the utility that's already in the space, such as electric. Is it on city water? Is it on a septic tank? Is there natural gas available? So understanding that, and then looking at, like on the electric, what the capability of the power requirement is. So the space square footage is also as important as the utility already going into that.
When you're taking out a facility, you have to decide first what you're making and what size you're making it.
because that is going to drive the type of equipment that you need. For example, if you're going to make just small batch production, this freezer takes up a 4x5 space. If you're looking at continuous freeze with a filler, you're talking that it's going to take up 20 by 50 feet. So, and all of the things that you need in between. It is going to be important that when you're looking at the space, will it accommodate the equipment that you need today and the equipment that you need tomorrow for your continued growth.
When you say that you can't take some of the things with you, what are those things that you cannot take with you to a new facility?
Typically, depending on the landlord lease agreement, anything attached to the building. So if you've upgraded the power, if you've upgraded the water, if you've run gas lines, if you have fixed the floor, if you've put in floor drain, ceiling tile, light, and in some cases, if you fixed or replaced the AC unit, or maybe you put in some sort of structure that's bolted to the building, then these are items that clearly you can't take with you. And in some contracts I've seen that the landlord says that the agreement stipulates that you must put the place back the way you found it.
So that's a big deal. If you've gone ahead and made a lot of upgrades to the building, you spend a whole bunch of money to do that, now you're going to have to put that thing back the way that it is. The kinds of upgrades that you're going to have to make to the building will also dictate what you want your lease to look like.
That's correct. When folks talk to me about a space and we go over some of these items that we just discussed, the client finds it interesting that we're not talking about flavors, but we're talking about a dairy or non-dairy product, and we're talking about the size. And later on in the conversation, they finally get it why we started there. Because my goal is that you don't spend more money per month on a lease than is necessary. If you have a building that's 5,000 square feet and you're only utilizing 1,000, and you're not going to be using that 5,000 square feet over the next 3 to 4 years, then I would suggest that due diligence was not conducted in really planning out what you're doing. At the same time, I found a great space. It's very convenient to my house, and we can start here. Then the discussion is, okay, so you're going to put 50, 75, 100,000, 200,000 into this facility. Are you prepared to walk away from 30 or 40% of that investment to go to a new space? If they say yes, then that's great. If they said no, then we talk about what they're putting in this space. Because again, it's not only for today to ramp up, it's for tomorrow. So in the case of power, let's say today we start out with one batch freezer. We already run the power for batch freezer number 2 that we may not be buying for a couple of years, but the infrastructure in power and water is already set up in the building. That could save you thousands of dollars, and it could save you weeks of time.
When choosing out a space, what is the biggest hang-up that you find people run into? When I say hang-up, I mean issues that they may run into that will cause them to lose a lot of time.
That's a very good question. And what happens is when somebody calls me, they've already signed a contract, they've already started with a contractor, and in some cases, they've already started not only ordering but receiving their equipment. I will get a call saying, do you agree that I need a floor drain in this? I just met the inspector for the first time, and now he's telling me or she's telling me that we need a floor drain. And in order to do that, I have to get the permit. I have to mess up the sealed floor that I already have. I've got equipment in there. I've got just about everything done. Once I look at the plan, chances are that indeed a floor drain is going to be needed. So there's an example of somebody jumping in and not understanding all of the responsibilities that are needed in order to be a manufacturing plant. So it could be, the low-hanging fruit could be, yes, you need a hand wash sink and a 3-compartment, but maybe someone doesn't understand that you can't have some vent hole up in the ceiling that you're looking out at the sky and an exhaust fan that is now going into your manufacturing facility. So some of these are minor and they can be fixed within a week. Some of these are serious. Some of these require permitting. It requires finding the contractor. It requires when the contractor can start. I've seen some of these projects delay 6, 7 weeks and cost another $15,000 in unforeseen. So that's why it's important that you call someone like me that will walk you through the steps well before you even read the lease for a particular space.
Can you get an inspector to come and look at a space before you've signed a lease with it?
It's desirable, and I have found it depends on the inspector and how big the area is. Some inspectors I've called, first of all, were very surprised that I called, and I invite them to come look at a space that is being checked very closely, and they're many times happy to help. Some municipalities will say, we cannot do anything until you send in the application. And on the application, it needs to have the physical address. So it's kind of a chicken or the egg thing. In many cases, when that happens, then what I would recommend to people is that they have a floor plan and equipment schedules and meet with the inspector at their office to talk about, here's the location I'm going to. They could have an aerial view of it. They can then have some photos of the interior. They could talk about what they're going to make, and they could talk about their overall construction plan. From that meeting, you can pretty much get an idea of the challenges at hand or not, and then you can proceed. That's a very good question, and it depends, again, on the municipality. You would be surprised that I've gone to some areas, some states where covering the state is maybe 3 people. After you get open, you may not see these folks for 3 months.
Does it help to have a relationship with them prior to calling them?
I think having a professional relationship where the inspector knows what you're talking about. If you go in and say, I don't know what I need, but I know what I'm gonna, make, it's not the responsibility of the inspector to tell you everything you need. It is your job to look at the regulations. They will tell you some basic things. Again, sealed floors. Of course, we don't want, the ceiling is going to have to be a particular ceiling. You couldn't have, for example, an open ceiling or something where the material could fall from the ceiling into the product. It has to have proper drainage, proper water. If you were running a facility and you were on a well, chances are the inspector is going to say you cannot run a consumable manufacturing product unless you filter this water. So communicating with these folks in advance, having a professional relationship, but more importantly, letting these folks know what you're talking about is key. What you want to do in this first interaction and meeting with the inspector is be prepared with what you're doing, what your plans are, a layout, and have to eliminate as many questions as possible from the inspector. That's the key.
Is there a place that I can go online to find all of the requirements, or do I have to go down to a specific city building to get a list of these requirements?
What I would say is you first of all determine who is the inspecting arm. Is it city health department? Is it an arm of the Department of Agriculture? At that point, they will, depending on which arm it is, will direct you to health requirements for a food facility from the website. If it's federal, it will direct you to the Department of Agriculture website to look at the rules and regulations of what's required based on what you're doing. It's not going to identify just your product. It's going to have a whole list of things, depending if it's meat, fish, if it's a consumable, if it's water, depending on what it is, they'll have these lists and then what you're going to do within that. So in the case of dairy, there's one set of rules for freezing and flavoring ice cream. There's a whole other set of rules if you decide to pasteurize your ice cream mix. So it depends on what you want to do, and then there's sub-classes within that. You can find them, and everything is laid out. The minor details will be the personal opinion of the inspector. So in these rules and regulations, they're going to be at a 5,000 foot level. There may be some items that the inspector finds for your specific location that may not be written down as the rule, but are unique to your situation that will be brought up.
Do you have a product or business you want to share? We want to know what you have to say. Leave us a comment on our website at thethcfoodie.com or on Twitter at SafeTHCFoods.